So now let me go back to the beginning, where I was at the beginning. Remember I was talking about how in the 15th century, before we were born, okay, there were two parallel monetary systems. There was the international system based on gold or silver, and there was the king's money domestic system, okay? And each of them had sort of a credit superstructure, not very much credit superstructure as a matter of fact, but some built on top of that. And if you want to really, enter that world, read Bradell. It's really the best source. That's not the world we live in today. How did we ever evolve? Okay. Mostly, historically, it was about war. So let's think about a world in which there are two separate systems. Okay? There's the king's money system, and there's the international money system. And there's a government central bank and a private banker's bank. So there's the government bank here. Which has treasury bills and issues domestic currency, the king's money. Okay, so this is the king's money, the domestic money we're talking about. And then there's a private bank, a banker's bank, over here. Okay, which has some reserves of gold here, and issues its own deposits, which are promises to pay gold, and there's some private credit here. Okay, I'm showing for the government bank that all the credit is state credit. Okay, it's treasury bills. Okay, and there don't have to be any reserves here. Okay, because the king is just promising to pay these little pieces of paper with his own head on it. Okay, and he can always print some more of those. Okay, so he's just using those to fund his operations. These are separate. These are separate currency systems at the moment. Okay, promises to pay gold and fiat currency sort of here. That's just a cheap way for the government to fund itself. And they're separate. Now comes war. Now we go back to, what is it, lecture 2 or 3, when we talked about how is it that the Treasury Secretary funded the Civil War. Okay. What did he do? This is the very first thing I showed you in this class. What he did was to say, to go to the private bank and say, I need a loan, please. Plus loan, plus loan. And the banker's bank made that loan by creating deposits. Okay, just like banks always do. And then, what did Salmon P. Chase do? He withdrew those deposits in gold. Okay? Here's hybridity now. Okay? Now, the government bank that's funding the government operations has all the gold, has taken all the gold from the private bank. Okay? And the consequence of that was that the banker's bank, okay, starts to use as its reserve, okay, the domestic currency. Okay? So there are three And that's the origin of hybridity. This is okay. That's the origin of the hybridity that happened, okay, is that the state used the private bank and the international bank, okay, as a source of war finance. This happened in the Bank of England, okay, this happened in the United States, it happened in most of them, and now they're combined. Now they did this for war finance, okay, and they sort of snuck up on the banking system and twisted their arm and forced them to do this, okay, if you remember. But after the war, they kept it going. And why did they keep it going? It was a marriage made in heaven. Ultimately, both sides realized. Why are we having these competing systems? We can both be better off. We can both be better off. Why? Okay? Because the king will bless these deposits and will say, it's okay to issue private money. That's okay. I'm not going to insist that my money is better than your money. You have legal protection. That is money. Okay? That's one side of the transaction. And the private market said, well, if treasury bills are a promise to pay money, okay, we're going to like treasury bills. You can borrow more. The ability of governments to borrow in capital markets to fund their operations is a lot more when they're tied in to the banker's bank situation than it is when they're just funding themselves by printing money. You know, a government that is funding itself by printing money can't fund very much. A government that funds itself by selling treasury bills, okay, to the private sector, okay, can fund a huge war, okay. So that's a win-win, okay. This hybridity gave the modern government access to capital markets. And it gave the private money issuers political cover by the king. Okay? So modern monetary systems are always hybrid in one sense or another.